Thank you, friends. I have a question for you. Have you had the experience, and if you have, can you call to mind an experience where you were so deeply committed to something, or you loved something, and something was really important to you, but it seemed like no matter what happened, it was a struggle, or it was painful to you, or in some ways it just seemed like it was never going to go quite right. I mean, it could be anything, right? Maybe you're somebody that likes to fix up old cars, and you get this clunker, and you know the potential that it has, and you put all your blood, sweat, and tears, and probably an irresponsible amount of money into the project, and it feels like it's working against you. Like it's determined not to be working, or working just like you wanted it to. Or maybe you are somebody who, at some point in your life, was working really hard to get a degree. And it just felt like everything was conspiring against you. Forces seemed to be working against you. It was Murphy's Law when it came to trying to finish that stinking degree, and you were so close, but it just seemed so far away. Or maybe it's something more significant, more serious even. The stakes are higher. Maybe for some of you, that's your relationship with your faith or with the church. That there were things and times that it would be, you wanted it so bad and you were so committed to it, and that it felt like you were being pushed away, or maybe you were actually being pushed away at different times. And I pray that that isn't the experience now, but maybe that's a part of your story. I ask you this because something happened recently that made me think about this. See, many of you know that I grew up in Minnesota, and I grew up more specifically in southwest Minneapolis. And the neighborhood that I grew up in, I remember very clearly as a child, whether it was any time of the year, my mom and I would often go, sometimes in a stroller or when I was able to walk on my own. She'd hold my hand and we would walk to the grocery store, which was a few blocks away. It was a Red Owl grocery store. Does anybody know Red Owl? I don't even know if those things exist anymore. But Red Owl was the name of the grocery store. We'd shop there, and then oftentimes we'd continue our errands and walk across the parking lot, and on this busy intersection, there was a Rexall drugstore, an old kind of pharmacy, which I think would look very quaint today if it were still there. The grocery store has now been replaced by a healthy, gourmet, yuppie grocery store, and the pharmacy is, of course, a Starbucks. And but otherwise, if you drive through that neighborhood, a lot hasn't changed. And just around the corner from there, about a quarter block down on the right-hand side, is Annunciation Catholic Church. And Annunciation was an unheard of church by many of you until 2 weeks ago, when you remember hearing about the horrible events that took place there as the children were worshiping and going to school in their first week of school, and a deranged person opened fire, killing a few of the students and harming many others, changing the shape of the neighborhood. And I was thinking about that and thinking about how these stories just keep coming up, and we even sort of don't even get reporting on all of these mass shooting incidents anymore. And now I've lived in communities here in Vestavia with St. Stephen's Episcopal a couple of years ago, and this neighborhood I grew up in as a kid, and it's hitting closer to home all the time, it feels like. And so I was scrolling through some social media that week, and one of my friends from college, a guy named John, who's a guy with a big heart, a big thinker. Always appreciated some of the conversations I had with John. And here's what he wrote that week. He said, I've been thinking a lot over the past couple of days since the church/school shooting in a community very close to mine. I have nothing more to say. I have lost faith that we will change. And when I read that, I guess I wasn't shocked, but I was still troubled by it. I'm not sure that I have arrived in that same kind of place that John has, but I certainly understand, and I certainly sympathize with how he got to thinking that way. I'm certain, like everybody in this room, we've thought, how many more of these do we have to experience before something changes? How does it change? How do we change? How will we become a part of the solution? And all of that. I'm sure we'd have very different ideas about what would need to take place to make something like that happen, but I'm certain that we agree that this is not normal and that this needs to stop. And so it got back to that question that I asked you at the beginning. Have you ever been so committed to something or loved something so much, and yet it just keeps going wrong? Dang it just keeps going wrong. I mean, I'm not giving up on our country, and I'm not giving up on the system, and I'm not giving up on the idea that we can make change where change needs to happen. But yeah, I'm frustrated, and some moments I'm sure I'm just like John, and I've lost faith that there will be change. Have you felt this way? I'm sure that you have. Jeremiah's text in the 18th chapter is the story of the visit down to the potter's house. And truth be told, we sing this song, it figures into a lot of the metaphors. A lot of Christians grow up and they think about going to the potter's house and the potter and shaping the clay, but it's a hard text. If you were paying attention and listening closely, it's a difficult text. It talks about a brokenness in a culture, in a system, in a community that is in peril. And I think that actually is far away historically, culturally, and so geographically as that story is to our current circumstances. I think that the sentiment is still the same. Here we have a community of people who have been living in a hostile territory. The neighbors on all sides seem to be more powerful. They've got bigger armies. They've got more weapons. They are bent on conquering and destroying, or at least oppressively taxing the heck out of their neighbors, just so that they are allowed to survive. And Jeremiah is working with the people of Judah and this little tiny kingdom. They've made a lot of mistakes. They've gotten desperate when they feel like the walls are closing in and their enemies are getting closer and it feels like the vultures are starting to circle. They have gotten desperate and they start to worship other gods, or they start to bribe other nations, and they start to make alliances that they shouldn't be making because it's going to lead to more harmful and destructive things. But this is what they do out of their desperation. And again and again, the story is that this tiny little group of people in this tiny little nation just keeps getting clobbered. First, it's the Assyrians, and as soon as that memory is barely in the rearview mirror, all of a sudden the Babylonians come in, and it goes on and on and on. And so it's a period of suffering, and it's a period of struggling and just asking, how much? How long is this going to go on? How much more of this can we take? What should be the response? And then Jeremiah is told in a message from God, go to this potter's house and go watch what he's doing. Watch how he molds the clay. But the clay is not good. Something is wrong with the creation that he is creating, and it needs to be wrecked and start over again. And it may be the consequences of something that was going wrong with the clay, or maybe it was a part of the process, or maybe there was a distraction in the process, but it needs to be reimagined, done again. And so the potter sets out at work to begin again on this project. Now, I think that the interesting thing in this particular text is that you can read this in two different ways. On the one hand, it seems to say, God says to Jeremiah, you see this? This is like the people that we're talking about. This is like your community. They keep messing up, and it just keeps becoming, the pain continues. And as long as you continue to do these things, this is going to be the result. This is a cause and effect kind of relationship. And you could read this and say, well, that just sounds like God is angry and God is out to smash the people and the threats are there. And what kind of angry God is this? And I think it's fair to draw that conclusion. I also think that we need to take into consideration that that's part of the theology and the thinking of this particular time period and this particular book, and that maybe it's a tough love kind of a situation and story. But I think that there's another way to think about this too. And that is that even though things are deformed and broken down and crushed, the potter doesn't give up on the clay. The potter's wheel continues to turn. So as I was reading through my friend John's Facebook post, and I was thinking about that, I noticed that there were a couple of comments. And I thought, well, that's ballsy. Like, who's going to comment on that? And then I thought we're going to get the normal, well, you know, it was going to fall into political divisions and whatever. But there was this comment from another classmate of mine from college, and somebody that I wasn't close to, who's an acquaintance of mine. And he said something that I printed it out because I kept thinking about it. I kept going back to that. I opened that post again and again, and I kept rereading it multiple times over the past couple of weeks. And I'm going to paraphrase what he wrote, but let me share this. And I didn't know much about him. I knew that he was gay. And he sang in the choir, and that's as far as I knew about his life. But there's more that he discloses in this post. And he says, John, someday soon, let me know if you'd like to have coffee and chat about this. My sobriety journey stems from these realizations over the past 10 years. He says, these are some things that have helped me and might speak into the situation and the way that you're feeling right now. He says, people change, but systems take much longer. People change, but systems take much longer. It's easy for us to have a fight or flight response when we feel pushed to the limits like this, and our survival always comes first. We have to be really aware to make new choices. And some of you won't like this word, but just bear with me. Being woke or conscious doesn't just mean empathy. It can also mean that you are awake and aware of both the good and the bad in the system. I can tell he's been doing some therapy, right? But it was so good to hear these words. It doesn't just mean empathy. It can also mean being awake and aware of both the good and the bad in the system. And then he says, for those who are marginalized, these are not new dark days, but they're more of the same. Once you're awake, you see it everywhere, but eventually you begin seeing good again too. For those who are marginalized, these are not new dark days, but more of the same. Once you're awake, you see it everywhere, but eventually you begin to see the good again too. It's important to see the darkness, but don't live there. I love you. That's a different kind of response than I'm used to seeing on Facebook. It's important to see the darkness, but don't live there. I wish that Grace United Methodist, I wish that Methodists worldwide, I wish that Christians were able to figure out the solution that makes sense once and for all for our problems, particularly these ones that seem so senseless and horrible. And I don't know what the response is. But I see the darkness, and as a person of faith, I am convinced that I will not live there. As long as the potter's wheel is continuing to turn and the potter's hand is upon the clay, then something new has the potential to be made again. Reformation is still possible. I don't know what has come to mind to you this morning as you think about that thing that you continue to commit yourself to, that you are staying in the fight, that you are staying in love with this situation because you are deeply committed to it and you refuse to give up on it no matter how much it seems like the deck is stacked against you. So hear this message of good news. The potter's wheel continues to turn. The divine potter's hand is still on the clay. Jesus did not give up, no matter how much things turned against him. When the whole community turned against him, when the people that threw a parade for him were now chanting for his crucifixion, when he was hung on the cross, to remember what his words were, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." That is a sign that no matter how bleak things get, the wheel continues to turn. That is a sign that the potter's hand still is firmly on the sculpted and unmolded clay. And that is a sign for us again that no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the issue, no matter what it is that you are facing, we are awake through this dark period. And we recognize it, we acknowledge it. But as people who are committed to following in the way of Jesus Christ, we will not stay there. Because Jesus has said to us, "I love you." Will you pray with me?